What's up? Did you ever struggle with right and wrong? Or maybe wonder like why some things are right, others are wrong, and who the hell decided why these things are right and wrong and put these rules in place? Well, today in luck, we're going to talk about who decides what's right and wrong. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Danny, everybody. Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
So, Randy, have you ever struggled with what's right and wrong and wondering like why certain things are considered right or wrong?
This is a confusing topic at times because sometimes there are things that are both right and wrong. And then there are other things that are neither right or wrong.
And
And
then
then
there's things that
there,
are contextually dependent.
yeah, so it's
Yeah.
very challenging. And who makes these rules? Who decides this stuff, anyways?
I don't know. I've studied ethics and I still have no idea.
Yeah, it's a
Well,
challenge.
it's funny because, like, I mean, there is like that, there's the obvious, I guess, connection to the fact that, like, we live in societies and groups and communities. And so I'm sure at some point in the past, we realized that, like, stealing from each other, for instance, didn't work out well because people got in fights, or like just murdering people didn't work out for like population and all. So probably some rules like developed for like,
They would
and
make like commandments out of those, right?
but that's what's funny. Like, that's what I always found funny is like, sir, it makes sense when you look at it that way. Like, okay, obviously rules are going to develop, but then how do they get to be codified? Why the commandments? Who was coming down from the mountain and
Yeah, exactly. Uh, it's interesting because like we were talking about the golden rule last week or something like that, and I think a
recently?
lot of rules do kind of come from the golden rule, like don't do to others what you. But also it it's challenging because there's so many different things that can tell you what's right and wrong. Like I know times in my life where I've gotten really off track was because I was listening to what somebody else's right and wrong was about my life.
Hmm. That's the biggest danger, though, is like letting outsiders influence your values, right? And like, it's always tough because, we want to fit in. So we want to conform. We want to look good. We want to do well. And we don't always know. So we listen to others, but ultimately, we have to have our own reasons.
But it's also like you kind of have, you can like when you try and figure out for yourself, you can push the boundaries so far, but you don't want to be the person who pushes it too far. Like
Yeah.
everybody in the financial industry cheats and steals, but you just don't want to be Bernie Madoff, you know?
Wait, a little bit too much, too far.
Right?
Yeah, it's the truth though, right? Well, that's the other thing we allow. That's what's funny when I talk about ethics with my students sometimes. Like, 'cause I teach like some of the philosophers, like they're pretty absolutist in their rules, right? Like they'll say like, like one of the rules might be like no lying, like so lying's always wrong. But if you think about it, we lie, all everybody lies all the time. Not that it's always bad. A lot of times we think, like for instance, like, if saying the truth is going to really upset somebody, you might say it differently or something to try and make it easier to accept or something. And, is that wrong? Is it situation dependent? Are they wrong for saying lying's always wrong? Like, I mean, this is the difficulty, right? And how do
That's
we
a
get to a
really
solution?
challenging thing to bring up honesty because this is something where, trying to be an honest person, it's so hard, especially when like somebody you care about asks you how they look in something
Yeah.
and
Well,
you
that's
know
it.
you may not want to disappoint them, but also if you tell them the truth they might get pretty hurt and it'll lead to a long discussion instead of getting somewhere place on time.
That sounds very specific. Yeah,
Just theoretically.
theoretically, just throwing this out there. It is funny though, because it's hard to know, like, this is what I always struggle with, I guess, with ethics. It's like, usually in morality, the goal is an ideal. Like, think of like the fully virtuous person or the absolutely moral person, like, doesn't exist. I mean, we might be able to find like a couple, cases, but they'd be like, very much outliers. Most of us are like, okay, we do some things that are good, some things that are probably not great, but we're not doing any like great harms. And I think this is always the struggle because it's like morality, you have to constantly be working towards that ideal, but you're never going to hit it. You're always going to
Mm,
make mistakes. That's why Marcus Aurelius kept reflecting on the same things over and over again, right? Because he kept messing up or, forgetting something or needing a reminder. Yeah.
true. Well, there's a saying, there's no right or wrong, only thinking makes it so, something like that.
Yeah, that
But
makes sense.
it's kind of interesting because there's, right or wrong, they're both judgments on actually what happened and what didn't happen. So really, there's only what happened, and we can
Yeah,
always speculate about what didn't happen. But then you could say, like, well,
that's
what
true. Yeah.
happened is the thing's nature. So wouldn't that then be right?
Yeah, no, you're right. Because a lot of times when we talk about right and wrong, we're thinking of a counterfactual. Like if the opposite happened, how would we
Hmm.
evaluate that? And then,
But we can
you
never
know,
make it happen, which is
no, we can't.
yeah.
Yeah, whatever is just is. So it doesn't make sense to even value it in the first place because that's what
But I
happened.
spend a lot of my time and energy arguing for that.
Already fighting this. I don't need more. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. And it's also hard because we have all these rules outside of us. And I think conforming to them can totally lead you off track. And you can do things for the wrong reasons, like you said. Or you could be acting for the wrong reasons. Like, just to give like a very vague example, like, or simple example, I guess, like if I'm really afraid of hell and really want to go to heaven, that might motivate me to act a certain way and conform to certain rules. But it doesn't mean that I actually follow those rules, internalize them, or believe in them, right? I'm only doing it because of some reward or fear of punishment. And I think
Hmm.
that's always tricky too, because socially that happens a lot. Like we might be afraid of being censored or made fun of or whatever. And so we adjust our behavior, even though we don't really believe in those things like internally, right? Like actually identify with them. And I think that's where it
Hmm.
gets really dangerous because then you're doing things that aren't really like, you.
Yeah. And also, like, one thing that's kind of frustrating about this right and wrong is it takes you out of being it, like, kind of like what you were just mentioning, doing it for a purpose. It takes you out of actually being present because you're like
Yeah.
trying to do something for some future thing that you have no control over anyways. So it's like, let me be good so that I'll have this thing in the future, as opposed to just let me just exist right here and do whatever comes up.
Yeah. And I think, the other problem with morality too, I think, is that it makes a lot of us like focus more on evaluating ourselves against others rather
Oh,
than
totally.
looking, and I think this, that's like the virtue signaling and all, right?
Are you a good pet parent? Are you being
Yeah.
a good mom, a good dad?
Yeah.
Are you
It's
living your best life? It's
it's
like, come
funny.
on.
I remember when we got the dogs, dude, I would see these things online about like training and stuff, and they would act like if your dog's not perfect, like you're a failure. And it's like, well, what if
Hmm.
I don't want a dog like that? That's not a dog, but like a little robot, you know?
Yeah.
It's like really funny. But yeah, that idea of like if you're not perfect, something's wrong, right? And like, yeah, I just think it's problematic because these things exist outside of us, but we also have to know who we are, right? And like tendency for people to want to judge others, I think can be really bad. That can be really
Mm.
detrimental because they're not focused on themselves and their own
Yeah.
behavior.
I heard something last week or the week before about how kind of this ideal of being a good everything puts us in a straitjacket where we have no freedom because we're trying to be good at literally everything.
Yeah.
And so if instead you can decide, okay, these are the things that are worthwhile for me to actually be good at, and these are the things that I'm going to say, hey, it's cool for me not to be good at, and just be
Yeah.
okay with that, and be like, hey, I'll be a bad pet parent, I'll be a bad guitar player, I'll be bad this, bad that, whatever. But hey, they're not that important.
No, and it's okay, right? Like, as long as I'm okay with it, I'm happy. And I think this is the problem because, like, you're right, it does constrain us. And I think it causes a lot of people to give up on things really quickly. Because if you don't feel like you're really good at it, you feel like there's no point, but there could still be a point, right? It still could be
Dude,
worthwhile.
point in case, I gave up playing guitar because I read some book that's like it was talking about how, like, why bother doing something if you're not going to put in the effort to be really good at it? And I didn't want to put in the effort to be like, I mean, I
Do you
would
know
have
what?
loved to be a shredding guitarist, but I didn't want to put in the effort to do that. And I was like, fine, so I'll quit it. But then I was like, hey, I was
Hey,
pretty good at
wait,
just being a bad
wait a minute,
guitarist.
book.
Hey, hey, book, you can't tell
Time
me what
out.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but that's the truth though, right? There's lots of stuff. Like I have lots of hobbies that I love doing, but they're not going to amount to, I know they're not going to amount to anything. I'm not good enough. One, I'm not good enough, and I don't want to put the time in to be an expert in it or to improve to the point where I could make, and I don't even want to make money off of it because there's things I just enjoy doing. I think we lose that if we're always focused on, you know, being the best or it's not worth it. We lose that. And I think that is tied to our views of morality and our expectations.
Hmm.
I think it's also sad too, because we've seen this a lot. We don't let sometimes our interpretation of morality too and our sense of judging others makes us also like blind to the fact that people can change, make mistakes, and like be different over the years. I think we've gotten to a point now where we don't give people a lot of chances because of that tendency to like, because it's like that virtue signaling and like judging others to make yourself feel better.
Hmm. Absolutely. And also the whole like good and bad. Yeah, I do this a lot. I make myself wrong. Like something doesn't go the way that I want it to, and I'm on
Yeah.
my own case about it. This is something I've been working on with self-compassion,
It's hard,
just like
right?
being gentle with myself. Because yeah, I'm my
Yeah.
own worst critic, and I hear a lot of other people are too. But like something won't go the way, and then, but I was reading something where it was talking about, this is it was the Massimo book. He was talking about like this is the price that I have to pay for peace of mind. So like it actually happened today where I was beating myself up that a situation went the way that it did. And it was an interaction between people. And of course, you have no
No
control over
control.
this.
Yeah.
So
Zero.
it didn't go the way that I wanted. And I was beating myself up for it. And then all of a sudden that the excerpt from his book came into my mind. And I was like, wait, this is the price that I pay for peace of mind. And all of a sudden I noticed that like the uncomfortable feeling is the price that I pay for peace of mind. And I was like, oh, well, if I just have to deal with this uncomfortable feeling, and it was crazy because like this
Yeah.
actual peace of mind like settled onto me. I
Well,
realized
that's
that like,
good then.
oh, this is the peace of mind that for yeah, having so it can be helpful
That
in
was like
dealing
the
with
goal
stuff.
of, the Epictetus was like, that's like a handbook. It's meant to be like you go to it as you need to different, and I think yeah,
Hmm.
it's a good use of it. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
funny though, but you need it. I think it's a shame because I think, from studying ethics, when you look at it from a philosophical perspective, philosophers generally focus not on judging others and like using morality as a means of judgment, but on our own development and growth, right? That's really what it's about. And I think we've gotten to a point where we focus too much on the outside rather than the inside. We're too busy looking at other people, judging them and the world around us, rather than asking ourselves, like, what can I do to be a better person? What can I do to make my community better? What can I do? What does that look like?
And it's tricky because they equate like eudaimonia or happiness with flourishing or the actual
Yeah.
good life. So if you're living life properly, you should essentially be happy or living a good life, flourishing, that type of thing. And it's tricky because most of the time stuff isn't going well and we're miserable. We're like, but of course I want to be happy. What the hell?
I want to be, but it takes so much goddamn work. Like,
No, right? Uh,
yeah. I
so
think there's,
tricky.
I think for well, speaking of the Stoics, since you mentioned them too, I think like they thought there was a certain peace of mind that comes with that, right? Because you're aware of what you have control over, you're taking care of your area, and there's a certain peace of mind of that because you've done all you can do and let the rest
Hmm.
be. That's a
Yeah.
good way to look at it.
Dude, and
Yeah.
I also heard that like the whole Buddhist notion of suffering, how like life is suffering and there's an end to suffering. Well, the end to suffering isn't because suffering goes away. It's
Nope.
just because it stops being something you try and exclude from your life. And I
Yeah.
was like, son of a gun. So you're telling
What a
me I can't
clever
get rid of the
twist.
suffering with Buddhism?
You guys said you were going to fix this, and instead you just said accept it.
I know. What the heck?
Yeah.
Tricky wordplay.
And it's tricky wordplay. No, I think for the Buddhists, but I think it does. It never goes away, but they definitely eliminate because you get rid of all the extraneous BS suffering, like the
Hmm.
self-induced suffering that we're so commonly causing ourselves.
Right,
God,
right. Yeah, and the
yeah.
clinging and aversion that gets to be less.
Do you know what's funny about right and wrong? I will say this, how so many people seem so certain about it, and it cracks me up because like I don't know, like studying like ethics, you realize that nobody knows what the hell's right and wrong, and that everything's
Hmm.
up in the air. Everything's open to debate, and like, but then you see like people be like, "This is just an outrage," and it's like, why is it? Like, I don't know their perspective, on it, and like, it's just
Mm.
funny. They just assume that they know they have some position of like privilege where they know exactly what's right and wrong.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And sometimes I even wonder about that thought. Like the thought that, so like they think that there's only one answer. I think, how can there only be one answer? But that's a thought too. Like I'm thinking one
Yeah.
answer. So yeah, going all around.
Well, we
So I
want there to
think,
be one
yeah,
answer because it feels comfortable, right? You don't want to
Oh,
be
yeah,
like,
it'd be easy.
you want to be able to say like, this is right, that's wrong, not this could be right in these 7,000 circumstances, kind of wrong
But
in
it's
these 800,
and you know what it is? They're always invested in that thing too. It's never if they're
Yeah.
never like, it's never like they don't do that. They're not like a Buddhist and they're like, "Oh no, Jehovah's Witnesses, that's the answer."
Yeah. That's what you need to do. Don't do what we're doing. This is wrong.
Yeah.
We just like it. That
All
would be
right. So
great.
right and it's interesting how right there's more than one definition because there's right and wrong and then there's right and left.
Yeah,
And it's the same
you're
spelling.
right. It is. That's really weird, right?
Yeah.
English is a
Hmm.
weird language anyway. Well,
Yeah. Just meant to be confusing.
it is. So we never know what's right and wrong, right?
Never know.
So there you have it. Hopefully that I don't know, clarifies something. You know,
Made you a bit more confused.
made you a bit more confused because you should be about what's right and wrong. Focus on yourself. Don't worry about it. Anyway, so there you have it. Who came up with this right and wrong anyway determines it. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. We'll be back later this week with a quick fix or a full length episode, I think, one of those two. Check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Like, share, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Until then, next time, there, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.